As many of you already know, I'm Jake Douglas, the founder and CEO of Practicing Musician. This presentation will outline a pragmatic approach to narrowing the achievement gap. The definition of achievement gap we will use throughout this presentation is any significant and persistent disparity in academic performance or educational attainment between groups of students. As most of you likely know, achievement gaps are widest between students of different socioeconomic statuses, genders, or races and ethnicities. They can be disparities between individual students in the same class or between students in different locations, and there are three main problems causing achievement gaps. The first is the high price of private instruction, which widens the achievement gap by providing a significant advantage to students born into families who can afford this type of supplemental education. The second is insufficient music program funding, which results in outdated teaching tools, lower quality equipment, and the inability to create programs that teach modern music, all of which reduces student enrollment and engagement. And the third is a lack of access to in-school music education altogether, which entirely removes the opportunity for student engagement in some districts. These three problems have persisted in music education for decades, despite the fact that they are well known to government officials, school administrators, music educators, parents, students, and the general public. Simply put, the solutions posed have not solved these problems on a large scale, and to me, that means one thing. Our current educational system is outdated. One fact about our outdated educational system in particular elicits diametrically opposed feelings of heartbreak and joy within my being, which is that within 1 month of school closures due to COVID-19, nearly 40,000 music educators joined the Facebook group Music Educators Creating Online Learning. My heart breaks because the group is necessarily entitled Creating, not discussing, not transitioning, but creating. Yet I feel joy because nearly half the total music educators in the United States joined a single group to create an up-to-date educational system within a single month. I want to personally thank you, Elisa, for your leadership at this difficult time. We are finally ready for change on a large scale. COVID-19 has uncovered deeply rooted problems in K-12 music education, which are similar to the deeply rooted problems the recorded music industry uncovered when streaming services were first conceived of and introduced by Daniel Ek of Spotify. Ek realized that the two primary options for recorded music acquisition actually created tension between the recorded music industry stakeholders. The first option was CDs, which were great for record labels and artists because $12 to $15 per album multiplied by the number of sales would often equate to millions of dollars. But the model was not very good for us as listeners because at that time period, $12 to $15 was equal to between 2 and 4 hours of minimum wage work in the United States. Then you have to consider the living wage in other countries. So a second option for recorded music acquisition was developed: file sharing services. We all know that file sharing services such as Napster, BearShare, and LimeWire were a form of piracy, which was horrible for the record labels and artists. However, if the listener didn't care about intellectual property laws, then file sharing services were great because they could acquire any music they wanted for free. And we quickly learned that a large portion of the population didn't care about intellectual property laws. No, piracy was common. In fact, the devaluation of recorded music provides insight as to how common piracy was practiced. It took 24 years, from 1975 to 1999, for the value of U.S. recorded music to rise steadily from $5.8 billion to $12.8 billion. But just 9 short years, from 1999 to 2008, to fall to a mere $5.5 billion. To summarize, streaming reduced tension between recorded music industry stakeholders. And similarly, we must reduce tension between music education stakeholders. The high price of private instruction, lack of sufficient music program funding, and lack of access to in-school music education altogether has created wide achievement gaps between our students. Music education stakeholders and the general public have been aware of these problems for decades. Efforts towards solutions have been successful on a small scale, but slow and unsuccessful on a large scale. Our inability to create large-scale and lasting solutions has resulted in progressively increasing tension between music education stakeholders. So I created Practicing Musician. Just as a single invention, streaming, solved all of the previously mentioned recorded music industry problems and reduced tension between recorded music stakeholders, Practicing Musician will solve all of the previously mentioned music education problems and reduce tension between music education stakeholders. The fact is, current music teaching tools and resources exist in a fragmented and sometimes even incompatible hodgepodge of solutions sold by different companies. The result is that they add to your list of expenses, which further eats away at your already insufficient budgets. Assessment tools, for example, are great resources. They're absolutely amazing. They reduce the amount of time you spend on individual student assessment in your classroom, giving you more class time to teach your students and play together as an ensemble. But before the advent of assessment tools, you didn't have to spend money to assess your students. You only had to spend time in class. In fact, it's often the case that current EdTech tools don't even save you time. They simply change how your time is spent. And sometimes the new tools are modern and cool, which makes them accessible to your students, but adds time to your already busy schedule. In other words, you have to spend money you don't have on services that add to your current list of materials and teaching tools. And all those students in school today grow up with technology and think it's cool. Added materials result in added time to your already busy schedule. Practicing Musician is completely free for K-12 educator and student use in music programs. We combine all of the most effective teaching tools into a single service that is easy to use, saves you time as an educator, and emulates the private lesson process. Why emulate the private lesson process, you ask? Because the achievement gap between individual students in the same class is widest between students who can and students who cannot afford private lessons, and Practicing Musician wants to level the playing field. Now, the private lesson process guides the student to learn new material, practice the material, receive and accept feedback about their playing, take notes so they can practice at home, and continue to practice at home until their next lesson, often 1 to 2 weeks later, to repeat the whole process. A key component of the private lesson process is to inspire each individual student to learn. To inspire, a teacher must connect to each individual student's interests by sharing their favorite stories, artists, and philosophies. To boil it down, the private lesson process is to become inspired, learn, practice, receive and accept feedback, track progress, and repeat. And this is exactly how I designed Practicing Musician. Now we're going to explore how the Practicing Musician service works, and then I will reveal how our long-term vision will actually generate significant and sustainable funding for your music programs. Before I designed our service, I conducted a meta-analysis of dominant method books such as Standard of Excellence, Essential Elements, and Accent on Achievement. I came to deeply understand that they all have a similar fundamental scope and sequence to their method. I utilized the same general scope and sequence when I designed Practicing Musician's method so that our service can be used to supplement hard copy method books. For educators who are ready to fully transition to EdTech, we're working to develop an educator learning management system so that Practicing Musician can be used as the primary and even sole teaching tool in your classroom. And again, our service will be completely free for use in K-12 music programs forever. Think about all the equipment you could afford if you never had to buy another teaching tool for your classrooms again. Because our LMS is not yet developed, We're providing every educator with free Practicing Musician full access subscriptions for all of their students during the 2020 to 21 school year, which I will discuss at the end of this presentation. To date, Practicing Musician has produced content for Year 1 and part of Year 2 band and orchestral programs. However, we are working to produce content for all instruments, types of music programs, and skill levels. As mentioned earlier, Practicing Musician emulates the private lesson process. Practicing Musician students watch interviews and performances with our world-class teachers to become inspired. Watch step-by-step video tutorials to learn new concepts. Practice new concepts by playing our sheet music. Receive and accept feedback via our assessment tools. Win medals when they play well. Receive encouraging statements when they do not. Track their progress in their achievement showcase, and repeat. Practicing Musician already offers well over 2,000 video tutorials spanning 14 instruments. Our video production team includes Emmy Award winners John Jacobson and Kevin Klar, and our teachers include members of the Seattle Symphony. This is Emil Kudjev, the Associate Principal Clarinetist for the Seattle Symphony. Pacific Northwest Ballet Orchestra. This is Virginia Jakoinski, a co-founder and the Assistant Principal Cellist for the Pacific Northwest Ballet Orchestra, and other world-class organizations. I advised our teachers to think about how production companies such as Disney and Pixar make films that are entertaining for all ages and incorporate their findings into their delivery style. And they did. Obviously, Practicing Musician is an education company and not focused on entertainment. But K-12 educators and students love our service, as do at-home learners ages 8 to 70. Simply watch a few testimonials.
As a teacher, I've really enjoyed having Practicing Musician in my classroom and also available for my students at home.
I enjoy using Practicing Musician so much.
Practicing Musician taught me a lot more than I ever learned in the method book.
Practicing Musician is easy to use.
Practicing Musician helped me learn things that I hadn't learned in class, and it was easy for me to learn.
Practicing Musician really helps me play the flute better than looking at the book.
My students are always asking, when can we use Practicing Musician again? Because they just have such a great time with the program.
I also made sure our teachers are from diverse backgrounds and that every action we take is looked at through the lens of equity and inclusion. Let's use the ascending B-flat major scale to demonstrate how Practicing Musician's service works. Here's the flute tutorial taught by Colleen McElroy.
Now that we know 8 notes, we can play a B-flat major scale. We're going to do an exercise called Up the B-flat major scale. Before we play, we're going to finger the note names and say them out loud so we can practice all the note changes. B-flat, C, D, E-flat, F, G, A, B-flat. Let's do that one more time. B-flat, C, D, E-flat, F, G, A, B-flat. Now we can play up the B-flat major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4.
After our students watch the tutorial, the ascending B-flat major scale sheet music is automatically displayed. Our students then play into their microphone, and our assessment technology provides them with real-time feedback and post-playing assessment. We are currently working to transition from Practicing Musician-developed assessment technology to the world's leading assessment technology. The functionality will largely be the same, so I will demonstrate the technology by showing you this video. Students win medals for playing well to stimulate their dopaminergic pathway, aka reward center. When students don't play well, they receive randomly generated encouraging statements that are similar to a private teacher's encouragement, such as happens to the best of us, or keep trying. Students also receive scores and additional feedback depending on their pitch, rhythm, and note duration accuracy. Play B flat twice, then A, then G. This one I played late. Each student's medals and scores are stored in their personal achievement showcase, a name I chose because it is less daunting than gradebook. Students can replay any exercise or song from their achievement showcase. In addition, exercises and songs can be played at any tempo, so our students can practice what they actually need to practice more effectively. We are growing our library of teacher interviews and performances, which we encourage students to watch throughout their time as a practicing musician to discover new inspiration and receive motivating tips about practicing, especially about turning the craft of learning to play a musical instrument into the art of being a musician. Now, it's imperative to understand how our implementation of cognitive and developmental psychology best practices makes practicing musician such an effective teaching tool. At surface level, these fields of psychology inform us that humans acquire and integrate knowledge via a sequence of inputting information, processing that information, and outputting results. That's why each practicing musician video tutorial is short, 1.5 minutes on average, and covers a single concept, providing an amount of information that is easy to process and retain. Immediately after learning a concept, our students practice, which is outputting the results of their learning into our assessment technology in order to view their progress. These fields of psychology also inform us that individuals have different learning styles, so practicing musician employs visual, auditory, and kinesthetic teaching techniques. Visual teaching techniques include teacher demonstrations, graphics superimposed over the videos, props, sheet music that has not been demonstrated during a tutorial so students can practice sight reading, and sometimes even sheet music superimposed over the demonstration. Sheet music is not always superimposed because we want students to increase their listening abilities, which is more of an auditory teaching technique. Other auditory techniques include teacher explanations about concepts, demonstrations of exercises and songs, and even incorrect demonstrations when appropriate to provide a comparison for our students. Kinesthetic teaching techniques include having students mimic a technique with our teachers during a tutorial and practice exercises or songs immediately after the tutorial finishes. In addition, the vast database of cognitive and developmental psychological research suggests that we should not teach two concepts such as pitch and rhythm to beginners simultaneously. It's much more effective to have our beginning students focus on one concept at a time. Think about when a baby learns to walk. The baby doesn't just get up and start walking. First, they learn to hold their chin up on their own. Then, they roll over, sit up, crawl one little shuffle, two little shuffles, 4, stand using a table or chair, stand on their own, take 1 step with a table or chair, 2 steps, 4 steps, take 1 step without any object to help stabilize their legs, etc. You get the point. But it's crucial to understand that this is the fundamental learning process for everything in life, no matter our age. In music education, we often teach beginning students proper posture and how to hold their instrument, make a sound, count, pay attention to their breath support and/or arm movement, and to read and play their first rhythm and pitch, all at the same time. And most educators only have 30 minutes to an hour with their students once or twice a week. We simply do not have the option to constantly observe our students practicing, like parents are able to constantly observe whether or not their babies are crawling or standing in a safe position. That's why practicing musician teaches each of these concepts, plus other beginning techniques, in individual video tutorials, so that our students can practice each one before moving on to the next. To make sure our service is easy to use, practicing musician tutorials are organized into chapters. The first is picking out your instrument, which has video tutorials for parents, such as renting versus buying, manufacturers and models, types of cases, accessories and cleaning supplies, essential tools, and other instrument-specific lessons. Depending on the instrument, the entire first chapter is a total of 5 to 10 minutes long, and every product our teachers suggest are their personal preferences. We are not currently endorsed by any companies. Then, students watch Chapter 2 entitled Getting to Know Your Instrument, which includes lessons such as taking your instrument out of its case, putting your instrument together, parts of your instrument, taking your instrument apart, cleaning your instrument, putting your instrument back in its case, storing your accessories and cleaning supplies, and other instrument-specific lessons. Chapter 2 takes between 10 and 15 minutes to watch, but students also practice each concept immediately after each tutorial finishes, so the total time to complete this chapter is up to 30 minutes. The first 2 chapters provide an excellent example of how utilizing Practicing Musician to implement a flipped classroom saves educators time. Practicing Musician can be the primary teaching tool without utilizing a flipped classroom, but the flipped classroom will save you time and accelerate your students' progress. For those who don't know, the flipped classroom is a model in which students watch online instruction and content at home where they cannot get feedback in order to come to class prepared to practice and do their projects that would normally be done at home with a teacher present to provide feedback. Now here is a potential general flow to flipping your classroom for the first few days of beginning band and orchestral class that we have already proven works well. On day 1 of class, educators set up students' Practicing Musician accounts and assign parents Chapter 1 and students Chapter 2 to watch at home. Students come into class on day 2 already prepared to get feedback on their ability to handle and maintain their instrument, so you can assign Chapter 3, Technique 101, to watch at home. On the 3rd day of class, students come prepared to get feedback on their technique. The fact is, K-12 educators who flipped their classroom to teach these concepts started playing as an ensemble effectively in only 3 to 4 classes. As one band director stated, "Thanks to Practicing Musician, my students are leaps and bounds ahead of where they normally are at this time in the year." Mary Ellen made this claim about 2/3 of the way through the school year with her beginning band students. In other words, Mary Ellen had experienced much more than just the first 3 chapters of Practicing Musician. Now, after students learn basic technique, they begin the chapter Rhythm 101. As mentioned earlier, Rhythm 101 is just basic staff notation and rhythms. We do not teach pitch at all. Then, students move on to Pitch 101, which builds upon the rhythms learned in Rhythm 101. After Pitch 101 is a beginning song library with public domain songs composed using the first 5 pitches learned in Pitch 101. Then Pitch 102 to teach the last 3 notes of the first major scale. And then Scales 101 to learn about scales. As you can see, Practicing Musician builds upon each concept sequentially. And again, Practicing Musician can be used as a supplement to the method books. We currently have about 15 chapters per instrument already produced and online. In addition, we will produce increasingly advanced content for our methods and add increasingly advanced repertoire for use in middle and high school music programs. What's really cool is that as a web application, Practicing Musician works on every device, including laptops and desktop computers, Chromebooks, tablets and iPads, phones, and everything in between, as long as it has a Wi-Fi and a screen large enough to display sheet music and video content. This is cool because if you have one device in your class and a cable to connect the device to your TV screen, you can utilize Practicing Musician as a teaching aid during class. For example, you can teach alto saxophone embouchure to the alto saxophone section, while the flute section watches flute embouchure videos on a single TV screen. Or, if your classroom has multiple devices such as Chromebooks, then flute, trombone, and trumpet sections can watch tutorials that teach them how to hold their instrument while you teach stick grip to the percussionists. As you can see, Practicing Musician accelerates student learning in many ways. I am personally hosting free live webinars all summer to teach you exactly how to implement Practicing Musician in your classrooms using our current best practices. You can view the webinar schedule in the Documents section. And again, you will greatly benefit because all content created by Practicing Musician will be free for K-12 educator and student use in your music programs forever. You will never have to worry about the cost of EdTech tools again, because Practicing Musician has already integrated the most effective tools into our service and will continue to add the tools that you request for your students. In fact, we invite every educator to join our private Facebook group, Music Educators Supporting Practicing Musician, to give direct input regarding our learning management system design and feature development, as well as content production. As long as we develop these tools in-house and do not have to license them from another company, they will be free for use in K-12 music programs forever. We are here to serve you and your students. In addition, we have already begun developing a pop music curriculum to increase enrollment and engagement in music programs amongst students that are interested in modern music ensembles. We have our sights set on creating many other modern music curricula as well, such as jazz, blues, electronic music, audio production, and many others. And by emulating the private lesson process, Practicing Musician is also the perfect tool for self-regulated learning at home for all ages, as is evident by our current at-home learners between the ages of 8 and 70. In comparison to our free version for K-12 educators and students, at-home Practicing Musician subscribers will begin paying $9.99 per month in September, which has a very specific purpose: to crowdsource funding for your music programs. Why? The fact is that the types of online learning services already on the market are effective to varying degrees as self-regulated teaching tools or as supplements for educators in their K-12 classrooms. But it is also a fact that online learning will never be as effective as the in-person teacher-to-student relationship. That being said, we know that teaching tools that are useful in classrooms and at home can scale massively. For example, Khan Academy had 70 million users in 2018. So I asked myself, what amount of funding could we crowdsource from 70 million people? I did some research using guidestar.org. As you can see in this black box, Khan Academy's total expenses were just under $49 million in 2018. And as you can see in this black box, nearly $31.5 million of Khan Academy's funding came from contributions and grants in 2018. And in 2017, nearly $43 million. A large portion of these contributions and grants are awarded by foundations that normally fund in-person education. In other words, one of the only downsides to Khan Academy is that it takes money away from in-person education. Using this data, let's explore a theoretical fundraising model I developed. As a theoretical model, please take the exact numbers with a grain of salt. If all 70 million Khan Academy users paid $1 per month for the entire year, Khan Academy would generate $840 million in annual revenue. 840 million minus 49 million annual expenses is equal to, drum roll please, $791 million fundraised annually. Now think about the impact that $791 million would have if Khan Academy donated it to in-person education. Then realize that the amount fundraised is actually $31.5 million greater because Khan Academy would not require contributions and grants to operate. I know the variables I used aren't absolute. However, we can be certain that although the exact variables are unknown, crowdsourcing large amounts of funding utilizing this model will work. Regarding Practicing Musician's fundraising model, we just launched 2 months ago before our planned launch date to help out during COVID. The point I'm trying to make is that the number of our at-home learners is unknown. We will charge people who use Practicing Musician at home $9.99 per month starting in September, and we will donate 100% of the gross profit from our at-home subscriber revenue to your music programs. The fact is, the model I'm proposing is essentially a large-scale booster club. A student is on the school soccer team. Their parents buy cleats from the booster club, and the gross profit is passed on to the soccer team. I'm simply proposing that a student is in music and needs supplemental education, which Practicing Musician provides for free. If they want to learn an additional instrument, Their parents pay Practicing Musician $9.99 per month, and we donate 100% of the gross profit to music programs. In addition, Practicing Musician will donate 100% of the gross profit from every at-home learner's subscription in the entire world to music programs around the world. We plan to distribute funding to music programs based on the proximity of our at-home learners. In other words, funding generated from a Seattle at-home learner's subscription is donated to the Seattle school nearest their location. To accelerate awareness about Practicing Musician, we're holding Practicing Musician's first big music giveaway for K-12 music educators. We have partnered with the International Music Education Summit, Eastman Strings, KHS America, and Give a Note Foundation, and have become corporate sponsors of the National Association for Music Education to provide one band director with a grand prize of 7 brand new KHS America band instruments and stands to use in their classroom, and one orchestra director with a grand prize of the 4 Eastman Strings orchestral instruments. Every entrant will receive 1 free year of Practicing Musician's full access subscriptions for all of their students during the 2020 to 21 school year, which will suffice until our learning management system is developed. The content we offer in our full access subscriptions is the same content you will be able to access for free in the learning management system forever. In fact, we're creating materials for you that are not currently included in our full access subscriptions, such as questions about each conceptual lesson for your students to answer and hand in at the beginning of each class, or email to you if schools are still closed and classes need to be held remotely. So they've just learned about embouchure, they answer a question about embouchure, they turn it in. You can tell that they watched the video. And again, I will personally host webinars all summer to teach you exactly how to implement Practicing Musician in your classrooms or remotely using our current best practices. You can view the webinar schedule in the Documents section. Another thing I really want to stress is that I'm personally inviting every K-12 music educator to join our private Facebook group, Music Educators Supporting Practicing Musician. You will be able to help suggest and approve LMS design and functionality, prioritize feature development, approve and suggest content production, receive live updates about our progress, watch us record new tutorials with our world-class teachers and Emmy Award-winning production team via Facebook Live updates, and be given the first chance to test new features as we roll them out. I want to make it clear that no educator is obligated to join and participate in Music Educators Supporting Practicing Musician. You will be able to use our service for free whether or not you support our efforts. However, the more educators join and participate, the more funding we can raise over time, and the more certain we can be that the service we develop helps you do what you need it to do. As you have all discovered these past few months, producing online learning is very time-consuming. Even just trying to integrate currently existing tools into a single comprehensive service is exhausting. We aim to reduce your time commitment as much as possible as we develop our learning management system, while still providing you with a voice to ensure that you get everything you need within a single service that you can use completely free of charge forever. We hope that you will support us during our development phase. Thank you for your time.